If this is the impact of the reported changes to the government comms grid, then it needs a rethink. It is unacceptable for important policy announcements to be made to the media before this House is informed. I call for the statement. Shadow Secretary State, Chris Philp.
Thank you. To ask the Home Secretary to make a statement on her recently announced immigration policy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, the British public expect and deserve an immigration system with order and control. In November, the Home Secretary announced the most sweeping reforms to tackle illegal migration since the Second World War. And last week, the Government took concrete steps to implement these necessary changes. I hear very clearly the strong message from the Chair, Madam Deputy Speaker, and of course would never mean any discourtesy to yourself or to your colleagues. Features of the steps taken last week include that refugee status will be now reviewed every 30 months. At a 30-month review, refugees with a continuing need of protection will have this protection renewed, while those who no longer have a protection need will be expected to return home. Further, we are introducing targeted measures known as a visa break to help protect the integrity of the UK immigration system. As such, from the 26th of March, we will refuse applications for specific visa routes from nationals of Afghanistan, Cameroon, Myanmar and Sudan, where evidence shows a consistently high number and proportion of visa-linked asylum claims. This is the beginning, and other nationalities may face similar measures in the future. Due to the number of asylum claims from nationals of Nicaragua and St. Lucia, we have also introduced visit visa requirements and direct ASI transit visa requirements on these countries to prevent visitor visa misuse. These came into force on the 5th of March. We have tabled further legislative changes to revoke the current legal duty to provide support to asylum seekers, instead restoring this to a power to provide support so that those who can support themselves do so. And we're also amending existing conditions of support legislation to enable the suspension or discontinuation of asylum support when an asylum seeker is working illegally. And we've started a consultation on our approach to family returns, exploring reforms to the support available to families with no legal basis to remain in the UK, and the approach used when enforcing the returns of families who have not departed voluntarily. Madam Deputy Speaker, after years of chaos and crisis, it has fallen to this government to fix the broken systems we inherited. I know this country. I know the protection that people want to provide to those who need it. We've seen that with the Syrian scheme, Afghan resettlement, Hong Kong BNO and Homes for Ukraine. But we can only do this where there is confidence that the system has order and control. These reforms restore this order and build the system the British people deserve.
Shadow Secretary of State.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, it is disappointing the government did not come here voluntarily to announce their policies, and I noticed there was no apology. But given the scale of their failure, it is not surprising. Since the election, 67,000 people have entered the UK illegally, a 45% increase compared to the same period before. Many of those 67,000 have since committed serious crimes, including murder and rape. In the last 6 days alone, 900 illegal immigrants have crossed the English Channel, and the government's promises lie in tatters. The gangs are not smashed. The French are not intercepting boats near the shores, as we were promised last year. And last year, the so-called one-in, one-out deal saw 41,000 illegal immigrants come in across the Channel and only 300 go out. So, the government is now resorting to bribing illegal immigrants with £40,000 per family to leave. That is more than most working people here earn in a year. British workers should not have to pay record high taxes for this government to give their money away to illegal immigrants. It is frankly disgraceful. Instead, the government should now agree to our plan to leave the ECHR, which would enable them to rapidly deport all illegal immigrants. The crossings would then quickly stop, and there would be no need to bribe illegal immigrants to leave. Let me turn now to ILR. When we proposed a 10-year path, the government voted against it. But I'm delighted they've now done yet another U-turn and adopted our policy. Now, while we don't agree with every detail in their plans, we do agree with the substance. But I'm sorry to hear some of the minister's own MPs are apparently unconvinced. So let me help the minister. Given the government appears to need our votes to pass these ILR changes, we will support them. Will the Minister confirm the ILR changes will be made in primary legislation or via the rules? If they do use primary legislation, that will take some time to pass, by which time the 2021 and 22 arrivals will have ILR, so we would also support him to pass emergency legislation if he will accept that offer.
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it is a challenge to be lectured on the need for apologies from the architect of Trussonomics that mean that my constituents month on month pay more on their mortgages. But we've seen more of that mathematics from the right honourable gentleman there, because he says that £158,000 that on average we spend on families in hotel accommodation who have no right now to be here because they have finished their way through the asylum system, that spending that money is better value than spending £40,000 in order for them to return home and to build their lives. Again, I'm not surprised. He talks about gangs. Well, he will know there have been a record level of interventions, more than 4,000. He talks about our work with the French. But he'll know too there's been 40,000 preventions of crossings. He'll know too, he mentioned returns. Well, 60,000 people have been returned under this government, a 31% increase under his time when he was in the Home Department. So he offers criticism, but the only answer that he offers in lieu is just to tear up international agreements with no sense of what change that would drive. It would merely set back that returns work and just leave us back to years and years of debate and no action. I won't do that. He mentions ILR. Of course, that wasn't the nature of the announcements last week. That was a consultation that closed, a very important one about earned settlement in this country. We'll be having those conversations with Parliament, and those, of course, will be laid in the usual way in the weeks, months ahead.
Meg Hillier.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I wonder if the Minister could update us on the discussions about people who have got leave that they arrived in a country, were pursuing leave for 5 years to get status in the UK or for whichever period of their visa, who are approaching the end of that period. I have a number of constituents concerned their visa they'll reach this point in April, and they're concerned that they will have to start all over again under a new process. Could you update the House on this issue?
I believe, again, the honourable member refers to earned settlement. It has always been the case that the immigration rules in force at the point of application rather than the point of entry to the country are the ones that are germane with regards to the conditions an individual has to meet. Nevertheless, the Honourable Lady will know that we did consult about what transition protections there could be. That consultation closed last month. There is, an important reality for all colleagues to wrestle with here, that we saw in the first 5 years of this decade unprecedented levels of migration through legal means. The open borders experiment by colleagues opposite, which means that 1 in 30 people in this country came in that window of time. That means, at the same time, those people will become eligible for social housing, for benefits and whatnot. That, of course, is a significant challenge to the taxpayer and to public services. But nevertheless, that consultation took place and will be coming back in the usual way.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Will Forster.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is deeply disappointing that these changes were pushed through without an explanation in this chamber. The same Home Secretary who emphasised the importance of scrutiny from MPs at the IPPR also denied this House the chance to question her reforms. That is not good enough. Does the Minister think that reviewing each refugee status every 2.5 years for 20 years will really fix the asylum system? That is estimated to cost £725 million over the next decade. Can the Minister confirm what plans the Government has to fund this, and can they give a cast-iron guarantee that it won't cause the asylum backlog to go further? Taxpayers are paying £6 million a day for asylum hotels, the legacy from the Conservative government. Will the Minister back Liberal Democrat plans to end the processing by faster claims, such as Nightingale processing centres, or set out their own plan? And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, will the Government confirm their plan for lifting the ban on asylum seekers working? Why have they chosen a year, not 6 months?
Order, Minister.
I'm grateful for that question. I am surprised the honourable gentleman doesn't remember the statement in November on these very issues. I can assure him his colleague on the Liberal Democrat front bench remembers it very well, and I think thinks about it quite a bit. On the 30 months, let's be clear about how the system will work. What we are saying is we do not want people to come to the country and get that good news of their claim being accepted for refuge and then be at home and not take part in British life. We are saying that if people do that, then their claims will be assessed every 30 months. Instead, they will be offered the chance to move to a protected work and study route, which means that if they are taking part in work, taking part in study, learning the language, not committing crimes, then they're out with of that. So I don't recognise the points on how many decisions would have to be made or the spend. That isn't accurate. But what I also would say, because he talks about quicker decisions, well, last year was the best year since records began in terms of decision-making for initial decisions. So we are operating that system effectively, but nevertheless, there are significant demand issues, which means that applications across the EU are down significantly and in the UK are up significantly. And until and unless you address those issues, any process changes simply will be overwhelmed.
John MacDonald.
Can I ask, has the government done any assessments of those people who, as other colleagues have said, have come here under one system, but now the system is changing, and where those people are actually working at the moment? Because in my constituency, there's large numbers of people who've come here and now in their 4th year before they were about to then conclude, hopefully then to secure status, and they're working in the care sector. And without them, to be frank, the care sector would collapse in my constituency.
Minister.
Yes, we do know where they are working, because the nature by which they came to this country was on work visas, so we're very clear where they are. In terms of the assessment, that was the point of the consultation that took place that ended last month. We got more than 200,000 responses to it. I think that shows the strength of feeling. So we're looking at that in the usual way, and we'll come back with our plans after that in the usual way.
Father of the House, Sir Edward Lee.
May I quote approvingly the remarks of my constituency neighbour, the Labour MP for Bassetlaw, who said that if Labour is to win their battle against reform, they have to do much more on illegal boats. I'm sorry she's not here, but I have warned her I'm going to ask this question. And she says specifically a very good point, that people should only be allowed to claim asylum abroad. Now, if that was the case, surely there's an argument that if they arrived here illegally, they would not be able to claim asylum, they would not be covered by the Convention, and they could be detained and deported.
Minister.
Well, I would agree with the right honourable gentleman in that I always agree with the honourable member for Bassetlaw. I've known her for a very long time and have found being disagreeable to her a bad idea. But on the principle too, we said as part of our statement in November, the 3rd chapter is about opening up safe and legal routes. The Home Secretary has talked about our first foray into this endeavour with regards to a study route, that providing those options for people to come and seek sanctuary in this country to the degree to which our communities can sustain it out of country, so they don't make those dangerous journeys, so we're not seeing people cross the channel. I think that's in everybody's interests, and I'm glad to see that that is drawing consensus.
Imran Hussain.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituent came to this country leaving a very good job, uprooting his whole family and young children on the promise that he would be allowed to come here, work and contribute in our NHS, which he has done for the last 4 years. But now, because of the government's harsh, hostile policies, he's left in a place where not only is his future uncertain, his children may not even be able to go to university. Does the Minister not understand the hostility and unfairness of this?
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman's question, and I would recognise, I think all of us would recognise the absolute importance that people coming from outside of the UK have played in the NHS for decades now. He will know that in our proposals that we set out with regards to earned settlement, that working for the NHS and working in public services was one of the proposed ways in which you could earn down that route to settlement. I say to him, as I've said to other colleagues, we're looking at the consultation closely. We do have to understand there is a real challenge that sits beneath this. And again, that it's always been the immigration rules at the point of application, not at the point of entry, that have applied. But nevertheless, I hear the point he's made and other colleagues have made with vigour.
Chair of the Select Committee, Dame Karen Bradley.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Could the Minister tell us whether the Home Office has made an assessment of the number of people who will be affected and the amount that will be saved from moving from a statutory duty to a discretionary power to support asylum seekers?
Minister.
I'm grateful for that question from the Chair of the Select Committee. The overall supported population is 107,000. Within that, there is a cohort of approximately half of those whose decision is now more than a year old, so they are able to access work in many cases. Similarly, there is a smaller proportion whom retained that right to work because they've overstayed their work visas. We are now doing the work of looking at all those people individually to see who that could work and therefore pay towards their own costs of support on the basis that, you know, if you can pay for your own support, like our own constituents, you ought to, so that doesn't fall on the taxpayer and we can reduce that burden.
Ruth Cadbury.
Madam Deputy Speaker, in my constituency, people of all faiths and backgrounds live, learn and work next to each other. And unlike many other European countries, the UK has a really good reputation on integration. So can the Minister reassure me that these reforms will not lead to the UK becoming like some of our European neighbours who have much poorer records on integration?
I'm grateful for that question. I absolutely can. And as she spoke about her community there, I saw my own community in that as well. All of our reforms are around promoting integration. So, for example, as I say, with regards to illegal migration, promoting that people come, who when they do come to the country to seek refuge and have an accepted claim, that they enter work, they enter study, that they learn the language, which is crucial for integration. But I also know, we have important work to do across government, of which the Home Department has an important component around social cohesion more generally, and later on there'll be a statement from the Community Secretary along those lines about that important cohesion work, so we can be that brilliant, integrated, multicultural country that I know Nottingham is, I know Hounslow is, and I know the rest of the country is.
Sir Roger Gale.
Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, there are thousands of Ukrainians in this country, most of them women and children, who effectively are stateless. They didn't come here as asylum seekers. They came here as refugees. They don't know whether they're coming or going. They can't return to their own country. There is no prospect in the short to medium term of them being able to. They need to be able to determine accommodation, education and employment. So what's the government going to do to create some sort of proper settled status for Ukrainian refugees?
Minister.
I'm grateful for that question. I mean, it is really important that colleagues appreciate that the Homes for Ukraine scheme and the way by which people came to this country from Ukraine was never intended as a settlement scheme. That was part of our engagement with the government of Ukraine at the time. Nevertheless, we have, as the Honourable Gentleman note, have extended that period of protection longer in line with the challenges that he says faces. We want those people to be able to live fully whilst they're here. I hear the challenges that he makes, but as I say, that scheme was never designed as a settlement scheme.
Andy MacDonald.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Minister for his statement. On the issue of work visas and on the issue of people being integrated into our communities, could he just say something about the abuses that we hear about how sponsors control the situation for those people and the potential damage that will be caused, especially to our public services, if we see those thresholds being unattainable by many of our key workers, especially in our health service?
I absolutely do recognise the characterisation that my honourable friend offers there. We know that there was abuse of that scheme by unscrupulous employers. We've been working, indeed, I met with trade unions only this morning, with trade unions about what a future model could look like to avoid that, so that if people do come to this country, they're not so precariously reliant on one employer, who therefore has a very, very unhelpful power imbalance over them and their lives. So we are looking at that very, very closely.
Chamberlain.
In Afghanistan, women and girls are being persecuted on the grounds of their gender. They cannot work, they cannot study. By law, their husbands can punish them however they see fit. And last year, the Home Office closed safe and legal routes for Afghan women to come to the UK. And last week, they closed the door both for professionals and students. The work of the Linda Norgrove Foundation means that a number of female medical students are currently studying at Scottish universities, including St Andrews. What hope is there for others to complete their studies and support the maternal healthcare crisis that is currently underway in Afghanistan?
Minister.
I mean, we take our obligations and our commitment to Afghanis very, very seriously. Since 2021, over 37,000 Afghans have come via resettlement schemes. What we've changed as of last week is that we have a student visa system that is being used as a de facto immigration system, which cannot be right. You know, what we saw with Afghanistan students is that of the 3,730 visa issued, there have been 3,454 claims for asylum at some point during them. That is not an orderly system. I say, you know, I feel the power and the passion with which the Honourable Lady speaks, but to accept that premise is to say that we believe that universities ought to set our asylum system. That can't be right. So taken in, I hope she would say, she would recognise that taken in concert with what we have announced with regards to a safe and legal study route, that must be a much better way. So we as a government and accountable to Parliament know who's coming, what their protection need is, what their institution is and what they're learning while they're here. I think that that's the right balance.
Members should be aware I'm hoping to finish this statement around 4:30 because we do have three statements. So if people could keep their questions and answers short. Afzal Khan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Boo Barb Centre has found that the restrictive policies have had an insignificant effect on the number of unaccompanied children seeking asylum in Denmark. Instead, the discrimination and constant uncertainty makes it harder for young refugees to learn, build relationships, or plan for their futures. So will the Minister commit to keeping the 5 years leave for unaccompanied children permanently to create stability for the most vulnerable asylum seekers?
I can give my honourable friend succour in that regard. Our 30-month protection announcement last week does not include unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. We take our responsibilities to children very seriously. I have optimism within our new system. Nevertheless, though, we need those children to be entering into study and then into work and learning the language. Of course, they've got the most to benefit from it. So our work with the protected work and study route will be particularly important for them.
Simon Hall.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister and the Government is to be commended for trying to wrestle with this.
Today in the House of Commons, the Government faced sharp questions over how it's handling its new immigration crackdown. The Shadow Home Secretary opened by accusing ministers of announcing major policy changes to the press before informing Parliament, and didn't hold back on the substance either, pointing to a sharp rise in people crossing the Channel illegally since the last election, and slamming a new scheme that pays migrants thousands of pounds to leave the UK voluntarily. The Home Office Minister pushed back hard, defending the government's record on returns and channel crossing preventions, while accusing the opposition of offering no real alternative beyond scrapping international agreements. From there, MPs from across the political spectrum weighed in. Topics ranged from a new rule that reviews refugees' protection status every 2.5 years, to visa bans on nationals from countries like Afghanistan, Sudan, Myanmar and Cameroon, to growing concern from Liberal Democrat SNP and Plaid Cymru members about transparency, with claims that major rule changes are being pushed through without proper debate in Parliament. Other flashpoints included the future of indefinite leave to remain for long-term visa holders, the closure of safe routes for Afghan women and students, and even an unexpected appeal from a Conservative backbencher to make exceptions for seasonal sheep shearers from New Zealand and Australia. It was a packed, often tense exchange, and a clear sign that immigration policy remains one of the most contested issues in Westminster.